Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the Life in the Movies podcast with Ryan and Jacob. I'm one of your co hosts. My name is Ryan Cam. I hope that you all are doing well. On this episode, my co host and I are going to be talking about, well, how red we are over turning red going from theaters to streaming and how we're just not fans of that. And we're going to be talking about a lot of other stuff. But first, I want to introduce my co host. He is Jacob Martin. Jacob, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Ryan. It's been a really good 2022 so far. I've been enjoying life. It seems like one day at a time. Some really good things are coming on my side of things. I wonder what's going on your end.
Well, just the usual stuff. Working quite a bit. My day job is not stressful, but I'll tip my hand a little. My job is basically I work with the homeless through a nonprofit organization, and sometimes you have to deal with a lot of their baggage, and so sometimes you just have days where it's days where you really get a sense of perspective of how, like, when I get on myself about how bad my life is, I literally deal with people who are somehow even worse and are trying to climb out of the pit of darkness and into a better situation for themselves. And I just am trying a little bit every day to aid them on that path. So when it comes to that job, there are a lot of good days and a lot of bad days. And sometimes with the holidays especially, it's been especially tricky. I can't go into it because it's a confidentiality thing, but today was just one of those hard days. But it's those hard days that really test you and they make you stronger. At least in the words of Nietzsche, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's what helps me.
Yeah, my sister, I think, can actually relate to some of the things you're going through. She works in the home healthcare field, and she's had clients that have had their ups and downs. I can't, again, dive too deep into that because of the confidentiality thing, but
Sure.
she definitely has, I guess, similar days, kind of similar to what you have on your end.
Yeah, and not just that, but sometimes you got to deal with uh, boards of directors, or for me at least, I got to deal with boards of directors and temperamental people who want things to run a certain way, but don't really want to take the time out of their day to see how we actually do it. It's literally them like saying, "Hey, you should do this differently." Okay, come over and show me. It's like, I'm busy. So it's again, I won't name any names, and I'm always aiming the positive route and gratitude and stuff, but just telling it like it is, I guess.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, it can be pretty rough sometimes, I guess, in a job like that.
It's the politics and the crap stirring that really gets on my nerves sometimes. But
Yeah. Yeah, you tend to see that. It seems like in a lot of jobs, it can be a little bit annoying. I've had jobs in the past where I've been annoyed by certain management decisions, and there's some people that it's hard to get along with. Thankfully, at my current job, I don't have to worry about other people as much because it's more about what you do that matters. And I really like working at my own pace and doing, what I'm paid to do. And it's definitely a lot less stressful to work in an environment like the job that I'm currently at.
yeah, that sounds wonderful. And uh, again, I could tell stories, but again, it's a confidentiality thing, and besides, I would go on more of a rambling spree than I would really want to, because this is the life and the movies podcast, so we have to get to movie discussion at the very least. So I guess the period I'm putting at the end of the sentence is sometimes when you have a job, it can be very rough. There are sometimes, like in my case, for example, I worked at my local movie theater for 3.5 years. I really liked it. I liked the people I worked with. I had to clean up the occasional bodily fluid, and I could tell you stories about that, which will be a future episode, I'm sure. but I really enjoyed working there, but there was no room for growth. So I just, at a certain point, I was like, I gotta eat. I had to leave. Very sad day, but you know, if you want to progress in life, you just got to realize that there are next steps, and I took the next step.
Yeah. Yeah, over on my end, there's been some really good developments that have come lately. I actually am involved in somebody's film production. My
Ooh.
buddy Dave, who has a YouTube channel called Interpreting the Stars, special shout out to his YouTube channel. He developed a screenplay for a movie during 2021. The project is called Secret Seam. It is a found footage movie set in like cell phones and webcams, kind of similar to movies like I guess movies like Unfriended and Searching and movies like that. And it's like this conspiracy thriller type story. I'm not going to dive too deep into the story because it involves a lot of twists and turns, but we did a table read of this movie, of the script, this past Sunday, and it was a really good little rundown of the script. Actually, Dave recruited a lot of his friends on like the film-based YouTube community that are actually playing these roles. Like Dave is actually playing the main character, somebody else is playing the secondary character, and other YouTubers are doing minor roles in there. I have the role of villain number 2, and I only have one line of dialogue, but that's okay. My acting skills aren't really that great or anything. I didn't join any acting classes or anything. So I think it'll be a fun little experience. Production on the movie is starting really, really soon, and I'm excited to see where this movie's going to go.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And is there an expected date on when everyone can see it? Like this year,
I,
like next year, or do you know?
I honestly don't know. The production is just starting this month, like I said. If it does have a release date, I don't think it'll be until like another year or so, maybe, but don't quote me on that.
Well, you'll have to keep us updated because that sounds fantastic. If it's a table read, then it's clearly like they're doing like he's doing this like legit. So keep us in the
Yeah.
loop on your social or here on this podcast, like wherever you want. Just keep me informed, keep us informed, if you will.
Yeah, like I said, Dave's channel is called Interpreting the Stars. That channel's mainly on movie reviews, and he has a very unique analytical way of approaching movies. Like he has two different like grading scales on his channel. Like he rates movies on a biased term and unbiased. And it's a really unique way of approaching movies, and I greatly respect what he does over on his channel.
It's kind of like reviewing, like in your head it's like, oh, technically speaking this is good, but in like your heart it's like, not so good, and maybe the other way around.
Yeah, that's like me with the movie Cats. Like it's a terrible movie, but it's so entertaining to watch for all the wrong reasons that I love it at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's kind of like Batman and Robin for me. I get that it's just awful, but I get such a kick watching it. I have so much fun with Arnold Schwarzenegger going, "Let's kick some ice," and what
You know
killed the
what killed your dinosaurs? The Ice
Ice
Age!
Age? It's so much fun. It's so bad, but I love every minute of it. So that's interesting. I'll put Dave's channel in the description. I'll just give him a shout out to that because that sounds amazing. Well, that's enough life talk. Let's get into some movie talk. And before we get into the main event, Jacob, let's talk about some stuff we've been watching lately. Now, I've um, I've been seeing on your channel. I believe your Donner series is continuing, right?
Yeah, Richard Donner. I had started doing his director project on my channel after he passed away in
Hmm.
2021. And I went through some of his earliest work in 2021, and some of those movies were actually quite interesting to say the least. Like, for example, he made a buddy comedy, almost like a spy spoof comedy in the late 60s called Salt and Pepper, which starred Sammy Davis Jr. and Peter Lawford, two members of the Rat Pack. And the way that movie was made, you can definitely see the seeds of what Richard Donner would later do with like the Lethal Weapon movies, but obviously the Lethal Weapon movies were better and better put together. So it was interesting seeing an earlier version of that made in the 1960s with two different actors, made during like the height of the 007 craze when they were clearly trying to spoof the James Bond movies. So that was an interesting movie. Another early one that was interesting, he made a TV movie called Sarah T, Portrait of a Teenage Alcoholic, that came out in 1974. And that movie is actually pretty good. It actually starred Linda Blair, fresh off of her success after The Exorcist, the possessed girl. And she actually plays another girl down on her luck, Sarah T, but this time she's an alcoholic, a teenage alcoholic that drinks too much and is struggling to overcome that addiction. And another interesting thing about that movie is that movie, come to find out, marked the acting debut of Mark Hamill, who plays her love interest in the movie. And so it was fun seeing Mark Hamill before he played Luke Skywalker. So that one is actually a pretty solid movie. Like, the cinematography is nothing to write home about. It's like a made-for-TV movie, but the movie's actually pretty good. It actually did the message, I thought, was done very well. And like, it's a pretty good like cautionary tale type movie, and I think it's one that should be shown in like high schools, personally, on trying to stop like teenage addiction and alcoholism and stuff like that. So it definitely had some really heavy stuff in it, but it was well acted and it was really, really good. And obviously we all know Richard Donner for directing, The Omen. He did Superman, and I reviewed Superman 2 as well, because there was the Donner cut that he did down the road because he got fired originally from Superman 2. So it was fun talking about that whole incident and how I like the Donner cut much better. It's pretty much like the early version of what happened that was later mirrored with what happened with Justice League, which is a very weird comparison to make. But the Donner cut of Superman 2 is so good. It's much better than the theatrical cut, in my personal opinion. I just recently watched a movie called Inside Moves, which was the movie that he kind of used as a palate cleanser to get over the fact that he got fired from a project like Superman 2. He was very depressed about being fired from such a high-profile project that he was passionate about making. And so he decided to make a smaller movie next. The premise of Inside Moves is about a guy who tries to commit suicide, and he failed at his attempt, and he's now partially crippled. And the guy finds comfort once again by hanging out in a bar with other people with other disabilities. Like, for example, one character is blind, another character lost both his hands and has prosthetic hands, another character is in a wheelchair, and his best friend also has leg problems as well, but he also wants to be a basketball player. And so they're rooting for this other guy to chase his dreams, get the operation to help with his legs so he can play basketball. The movie, it's nothing really to write home about. Like, there's moments of the movie that feels like it drags on a bit too long, and there's like a love triangle in the movie that I don't really care for. But overall, this is a really solid little movie. It did have some good performances. I like the heart that the movie was trying to set up with its story. I do like the inspiring story of a guy overcoming the odds pretty much and learning to find comfort and humanity again after trying to end his life. And I did like the group of characters that he meets along the way. So it's a movie that's kind of a meh movie, but it has some redeemable moments. So it's not a bad movie. And I'm excited to check out some of the other Richard Donner movies going forward. Of course, some that I'll be rewatching are like the Goonies and the Lethal Weapon films and Scrooge. But he has some interesting movies that I'm excited to check out going forward.
Yeah, it sounds like Salt and Pepper walked so Lethal Weapon could run.
Yeah, that movie. It's definitely a movie of its time. It's definitely a cheesy, dated movie, but it's still fun for what it is. And I watched quite a bit of other stuff this week as well. I watched Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs for the first time since
Love,
theaters.
love that movie. It's so
I
good.
haven't seen it since it came out in 2009. And it's funny, back then I just thought the movie was an average animated film. But I didn't know who Phil Lord and Chris Miller was at that time, and neither did anybody else. That was their first movie. I didn't pay attention to Lord and Miller until the Lego movie. And that movie was awesome. But they've since gone on and did, Spider-Verse, Mitchell's versus the Machines. So watching it again all these years later, and you can see the Lord and Miller isms with this movie, and it is a blast. I highly enjoyed rewatching it again all these years later. Very creative animation. I love the food puns. The voice cast, especially, is great. I mean, you cast Mr. T as a cop. I mean, what more do you want?
Flint like wood.
It's
Contact
great.
lens, flint like wood. This represents you, and my eye is my eye. I've got my eye on you. And then Flint's like, oh my goodness, a jaywalker. That part is so good. Cloudy with Chance of Meatballs is so underrated. I'm surprised nobody talks about it, especially with the Lord and Miller factor, considering that they're like the most consistent animated directors going nowadays. It's so much fun, and I love when they're like they have a snowball fight, but it's made out of ice cream. I thought that
Yeah.
was a lot of fun, and Flint taking all the requests, and people are like guacamole and like steak and French fries, and just like and the breakfast scene alone will make you hungry. It really will.
Yeah, pretty much the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and Ratatouille are the two animated movies off the top of my head where every time I watch it, it makes me hungry.
That's for
Ugh.
sure.
Yep. I also watched the Harry Potter 20th anniversary special on HBO Max. As a fan of that franchise, that was a treat to seeing all the actors come together, especially Daniel, Rupert, and Emma share some memories on set that they had, and just having some bittersweet memories. It was a really good special for what it was. I really liked the section where they paid tribute to some of the actors who died since the movie's come out, like Richard Harris and Alan Rickman and John Hurt, to name a few. That was a very touching segment of the movie. And it was a really good little reunion special if you're into the Harry Potter films.
I hear rumors that they might do another one, or they want to do another one.
Another special, talking about Harry Potter.
Yeah, I think I read something somewhere that the cast loved doing it so much that they want to do it again sometime.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about that, but if they do another one, I'm definitely down for that. I'd love to see more of these actors and directors talk about some Harry Potter stuff. I always I can't turn down Harry Potter. I love that franchise so much. Let's see. I revisited Interstellar. That's a great movie.
Love me some Interstellar. That movie it's gotten so much better now that I watched it again for my Nolan review series, the one that was supposed to be a Nolan month, but it turned to be a Nolan 3 months because Tenet got pushed back due to COVID. And so I was like, I'm going to review all the Nolan movies in 1 month. Tenet's not going to move. And then it did, which was kind of sad. But I got to see Interstellar again, which I had not seen since the theaters. And I thought it was a bit preachy at times, but to think that Nolan like basically was like, all right, I've got my money through the Dark Knight movies. Now it's time to make my art. And he made Interstellar. I call Interstellar probably the most Nolan movie ever. It's like either that or The Prestige. It's like those two. When you're introducing someone to Nolan, it's either one of those two, in my opinion.
Yeah, those are definitely two great Nolan movies. In fact, The Prestige is actually my favorite of Christopher Nolan movies, a criminally underappreciated movie that deserves more love. Interstellar is one of those movies where I feel like it gets better and better the more I watch it. And I was a fan of it since I first saw it in theaters, but the more times I've gone back on it, the more and more I see the absolute genius of that movie, whether it's the visual effects or the emotional core of the storytelling, the performances, and what Nolan was going for with the story. It's weird people tend to dog on Christopher Nolan because they claim like his movies have no emotion put into them, and I can kind of see where they're coming from if we're talking about movies like Tenet or Dunkirk, but you got to look at Interstellar. Like some of the sequences in that movie, like if you're prone to crying easily, like the scene where McConaughey's character just watches the kids grow up for all the footage and
Yeah.
seeing that up in space, and time has not gone by when he's up in space going through the wormhole and all those planets, but they've always rapidly on Earth is such a downer sequence.
Yeah, I love the cinematography of this movie. I love the scene when they're on the water planet and they're like, "What are those mountains doing?" It's like those aren't mountains, they're waves. And the music just kicks on. The Hans Zimmer probably doing his most Hans Zimmer score ever, if
Yep.
we're being honest.
Yeah, that score is genius. It's a great movie. The score, even the ending, which I know people tend to be divisive over the ending, and I can kind of see where they're coming from. But I mean, it's a sci-fi movie. You got to take some liberties, I guess, with some aspects of going into space and what you want to do with a story like this. And I thought it worked.
Yeah, and I like this ending as well. I kind of see this movie as Matthew McConaughey leaving to do a job and promising that he will be back. And and I have a feeling that with Nolan, you can get. I feel like Nolan has this idea where he can go as crazy as he wants, but if he keeps like a little like rope of emotion, kind of like what are we fighting for or what are we trying to get to, that's that's what makes it work. That's why I wasn't really a big fan of Tenet. I just thought I don't know. My opinion on Tenet is just so kind of out there because I respect the craft that went into there. He blew up a plane to get what he wanted. He blew up a
Yeah.
747 with practical explosions, but you cannot hear a blessed thing these characters are saying.
Yeah, you have to just watch the movie with subtitles.
I guess so, but
Yeah, it's weird with Tenet because I saw that one in theaters when it came out, and I noticed something was off about that sound mix. Like, why is the music louder than the dialogue? And I thought, oh, maybe when I buy the Blu-ray, it might change things a bit. I'm like, nope, same problem at home. But from what I understand of that movie, I do like what Nolan was going for in that movie, even though it might be his messiest film that there is. But yeah, I still respect the heck out of Tenet. Interstellar is probably one of his best films. I think it's close, if not, I think it's close to making my top five. It might crack my top five on further rewatches, but it is such a good movie that I love going back to. And the only reason that I revisit again was that I joined a Facebook group where we do like a movie of the month, and the movie that was chosen for January was Interstellar. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna vlog my rewatch of Interstellar and make a quick video for this Facebook group. And man, I love revisiting me some Interstellar. Christopher Nolan might just be my favorite director working today. Just the overall consistency that he has on his movies are just off the chart. Like even, yeah, I have some issues with Tenet, and following his first film is easily like my least favorite, but
yeah.
all of his other movies are just great. Like even Insomnia, which nobody talks about, there's great aspects in that. I love the Dark Knight trilogy. Inception is fantastic. The Prestige is my absolute favorite. And of course, I love Interstellar, and Dunkirk I thought was really good too. So
Yeah, I love Dunkirk. Tenet Tenet is the movie that was like, okay, this is clearly the one where I was like, this is like the one thing that I'm not a fan of. I'm a fan of the rest. Following is a bit uneven, but it's Nolan's first movie. I give him a little slack because he was still figuring a lot of that stuff out. It was basically him and his brother Jonathan, like just filming everything in guerrilla. So I give them nothing but credit for doing at least that much. But I see why people are not such fans of it. I am psyched, however, for Nolan's next movie, Oppenheimer. The cast in
Yes.
that alone is just so tantalizing.
I already know that's my most anticipated movie of 2023. I don't even have to look at any other movie scheduled to come out that year. But you got Christopher Nolan and you got an incredible cast like Cillian Murphy, Robert Downey Jr., I think Matt Damon, I think, is he supposed to be in it?
I believe I
And
read he is in there.
I think Florence Pugh I saw was cast in it, and several other big names. I'm just like, yes, this movie, the cast is getting stronger by the day. I'm so excited.
Yeah, all we need is Tom Hardy and Michael Caine, and it's like Cillian Murphy, Tom Hardy, and Michael Caine are like the holy trinity of Nolan actors.
Yep, the icing on the cake right there. And then there's a couple other movies that I've watched too. I watched quite a bit of movies this past week. I revisited for the first time in several years Cinderella 2, Dreams Come True, the direct-to-video Disney sequel. I do watch some of those direct-to-video sequels for my Disney project. I've been going through some of those.
How was that?
I haven't seen it since I was a kid, and I wasn't a fan of it as a kid, so if that says anything about the quality of the movie. It's one of those movies, it's weird, because there's some of those cheapquels, as some of us fans like to call them, where they take like three different short segments and combine them into a movie, marketing it as the sequel. Belle's Magical World was notorious for that, as that was like 3 episodes of a rejected Beauty and the Beast TV series put into an animated film, marketed as the third Beauty and the Beast movie, and the animation in that movie was awful. You can tell it was cheaply made. Cinderella 2 actually had decent animation, but the stories were pretty lackluster. Like, literally, the framing device of Cinderella 2 is the mice and the fairy godmother teaming together to make a book for Cinderella. And each of the segments in Cinderella 2 were the stories we follow in the movie. And it's as boring and uninspiring as it sounds. There's one story that I thought was pretty decent, as it involves Anastasia, who actually falls in love with the baker. The mother forbids that, and Cinderella actually goes out of her way to help her find follow her dreams and her true love. And I actually like the messaging in that, Cinderella not having any hard feelings against Anastasia for the hard treatment that she and her family had against her in the original movie. I actually like the spirit of what they were trying to go for, and I kind of wish that was the main storyline instead of it being a short segment, because the other segments are just bad. Like, there's one with Jack the mouse wanting to become human, so we follow him being human for, I don't know, 10-15 minutes, and it was just dumb. I don't know why. It felt like one of those like short films you'd see on like Disney Plus, like expanded shorts you'd see. Like, I know they had those like Up shorts that just dropped on Disney Plus with Doug. I mean, they're fine as extra shorts, but when you're advertising it as your sequel, that is a terrible direction to go.
Yeah.
It was I don't think it's the worst of the infamous direct-to-video sequels, but I did not like this one, man.
Yeah, I shouldn't talk too much. I defend quite a few Disney Channel original movies, so I shouldn't talk
I
too
like. Oh,
I
go ahead.
shouldn't talk too much crap.
I like some of the direct-to-video sequels. Like, I thought The Lion King 2 is actually a pretty good sequel. I really liked Pooh's Grand Adventure: The Search for Christopher Robin, which is a very emotional and kind of a dark story for a Winnie the Pooh film. And I also thought an extremely goofy movie was a decent follow-up to a goofy movie. So there are some not bad, decent, sometimes great direct-to-video sequels if the right budget and the right stories are there. But just Cinderella 2 is just not one of them. And then I also watched. Oh, what'd you say?
Listening to you talk about Cinderella 2, I was thinking of this Roger Corman movie called The Terror. Basically, Roger Corman, for those of you who don't know, Roger Corman was like the king of B movies. Like, he was an expert at making these very small budget movies, like on the cheap and like on schedule. But Corman, to his credit, he kind of gave a lot of known directors like James Cameron and Francis Ford Coppola their starts. And he made this movie called The Terror. It starred Boris Karloff, and to my knowledge was the acting debut of Jack Nicholson. We all have heard of him. It was famous because I believe, if my history serves me correct, Corman had just shot one of his Edgar Allan Poe movies in this castle. And he had this castle for 2 more weeks. And since Boris Karloff was there, Corman shot a bunch of footage with Karloff and then sent him home. And so it was like, all right, I've got this Karloff footage. Now what do I do with it? And so he had Jack Nicholson, he had all these other actors, and he basically just filmed segments and tried to join them all together into a movie that was eventually called The Terror. I want to watch it. I want to watch it one day for my Scary Mania series to hear if it's really as bad as people say it is. But hearing you talk about Cinderella too,
that sounds ridiculous. It sounds like a disaster waiting to happen.
From everything I have read, it is pretty bad. But there's a part of me that really wants to watch it because I am a fan of Roger Corman, but also just hearing about his style of like, all right, let's make 2 movies today, like. What? But he would do it, and he would finish it under budget and on time. And it's like he was an expert at it. I believe I read a quote somewhere that someone said if Roger Corman were making movies today, he would be doing like 2 a days or something like that. It's just wild stuff.
Yeah. And the way you describe The Terror, it kind of reminds me a little bit of, have you seen Plan 9 from Outer Space, the movie Ed Wood directed? He filmed like random footage of Bela Lugosi, and then he died, and so they made a movie around his final footage, and they had to have a stand-in for Bela Lugosi, and the guy doesn't even look like him, so he just had to cover his face.
I'm totally Bela Lugosi, you guys.
Oh, talk about So Bad It's Good movie, and I kind of respect that movie a little bit more thanks to the Ed Wood biopic Tim Burton directed with Johnny Depp. I think kind of helps make you appreciate some of those cheesy bad movies.
Yeah, because at least some of them were somewhat coherent.
Yeah, but that one had like no story at all. It's just random nonsense with aliens and Bela Lugosi and fake Bela Lugosi, like the bizarre-looking alien zombie things or whatever that was. The really thin lady, big guy trying to be all scary.
We got to do like a watch along of that. I believe it's in the public domain, so I don't think we would get copyrighted, but we should do a watch along of that. It would just the 2 of us just laughing our heads off at this insanity we're watching. And hopefully,
Yeah,
I
am down for that. We need to do that next Halloween.
Well, this coming Halloween, let's do it.
There we go.
In the words of Randy Savage, it's a date. Don't be late.
Yep. I got 4 other movies to share, and then I'll hand it over to you. I rewatched Zombieland. That's always a blast. I'm vlogging videos of movies that my sister has never seen before, who's 2 years younger than me. And so she picked out from a handful of movies that we placed in slips of paper that we placed in a bag of movies that are in my home media collection that she's never seen because I collect a bunch of stuff. She picked out Zombieland, and man, she loved that movie. And she's not even a big zombie movie fan. But I think what made her like Zombieland was because of how much of a comedy it was. And so there wasn't really that much scares in the movie. It was much more played for laughs. And as soon as she said she really loved that movie, I'm like, yep, we got to do Shaun of the Dead next.
Shaun of the Dead is awesome.
Yes, I love that one. That one I think is even better than Zombieland, personally.
Mm. Yeah, Shaun of the Dead, it's weird. It's really funny. It is a comedy, but it's got some dark moments in there too. Like,
yeah, there is.
Scene where they're all in the Winchester, it's all going down, and like and Sean's mom gets infected. Oh my!
Yeah, that was pretty dark.
And there, that whole scene, I won't spoil it. You all just have to watch it for yourselves. But just, oh, it gives me PTSD just thinking about it. It's one of those emotionally raw moments where you're just not prepared for it. You're like, oh God, movie, please don't do this.
Yeah, the one scene I will say that I totally forgot about rewatching it was Amber Heard shows up in this movie as kind of like a love interest roommate of Jesse Eisenberg, and she's the first one who gets turned into a zombie. Now, I know she has a lot of personal drama I'm not diving into on this podcast.
That's awkward.
She's scared the jeebies out of me as a zombie. So as much as people trash her and maybe deservedly so, I don't want to go too deep into that, but ooh, she played her part well. That's all I'm gonna say there.
Yeah, no comment. No comment at all.
Yeah, I ain't diving into that, but
I respectfully plead the fifth.
Fair enough. And then for my Superhero Saturday series, I rewatched Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, which I have not seen in many years. I liked both of those movies as kids, by the way. That was one of my gateways to the comic book genre.
Wow.
Both of those movies haven't held up compared to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, The Dark Knight, Superman, all those movies, which are still great and were part of the movies that why I love the genre to begin with. These movies, I love Chris Evans though. He's great as the Human Torch, but
talk about somebody who recovered in the Marvel world, going from Human Torch in the Tim Story Fantastic Four movies to Captain Friggin' America.
Yes,
that's a 180 if I've ever seen it.
He was fine, and I liked Michael Chiklis as The Thing. Those are like the only two castings that I thought were fine. But then I was not a fan of Reed and Sue's relationship. I never bought their chemistry in both movies. Jessica Alba, God bless her, but she was miscast in that role. I'm sorry. They just cast her, I swear, just because of how attractive she was. And you got to at least have some sort of emotion with a character like that, but she has none in both movies. And the romance is awful. The action scenes aren't really that great. Like, people tell me that Doctor Doom's one of the great comic book villains. I don't see that in either of these two movies. He is such a boring villain. The sequel at least had the Silver Surfer, which I liked the setup of that, but then they had stuff about how he's a puppet for Galactus and he's coming down on Earth, and I'm like, okay, this is very interesting stuff, but we see none of that play out in the movie. All we see is Galactus, the big evil storm cloud, showing up to destroy the Earth, and I'm like, is there more of that than just an evil storm cloud? People tell me you're Thanos level bad. I don't see the hype of this character at all. So unless
You
Kevin Feige does something with these characters going forward, these are not good Fantastic Four movies.
know, I'm not a humongous fan of the movie Eternals. I thought it was just okay, but they handled a Galactus level villain in, I can't remember its name, but they remembered like one. They did one of those like villains better in like that character's limited screen time than all of Rise of the Silver Surfer. That looked like Galactus just farted, and it was like on a time delay, and it finally showed up to Earth.
Yeah, I think I read there was disagreements between like the actors and I'm not the actors, but the directors and the studio heads on whether Galactus would actually show up in the movie. So it must have been a last minute throwaway addition. And yeah, what a waste.
God bless Lawrence Fishburne. I thought I thought his voice made for a good Silver Surfer, but
Yeah.
again, it was just kind of wasted. And Doctor Doom, God bless him, like he got done dirty not once, not twice, but thrice. Like he was the
Yes.
villain in Fant Four Stick, but
Oh,
they
that
turned
was the worst version yet.
they turned him into one of those crash test dummies, but made him neon.
That was so bad.
It would
Actually, that was Doug Jones who actually physically played the Silver Surfer, and he would show up in a lot of Guillermo del Toro movies. So
that makes a lot.
I actually really liked I liked his physical embodiment in the scenes where you actually physically see the Silver Surfer, not just this CGI character flying around on a silver board. So,
Yeah, it did. It was like I used to think the Tim Story Fantastic Four movies were bad, but then when Fan Four Stick came out, I said to myself, Fantastic Four has reached a new level. It is called the basement.
yeah. I like Silver Surfer a little more than the first one. At least this one, I like the Silver Surfer aspect on paper, and some of the action scenes were a little more memorable, but they're not good movies. And one last thing about Silver Surfer, I must say, you know how people like dogging on Spider-Man 3 for having that cringy dance scene with Tobey Maguire? The dance scene in Rise of the Silver Surfer is 10 times worse. That the stance in Spider-Man 3, which I always defend by the way, fits better in the tone of that movie than this dance scene in Silver Surfer, which is just bad.
Yeah, by a country mile, really. At least I do defend that whole thing. It's become a meme and people make fun of it, but I defend it. I think in the whole story arc of Peter's going through like a bad boy phase and he's never really been one, so this is his idea of one. It makes sense. But when like Reed Richards is doing this whole woo like
And the
every time
CGI looks terrible now, by the way.
every time I see it, I'm thinking to myself, wacky, waving it, arm flailing tube man.
All right, I got two more movies I got to share. The first one is Love in the Afternoon. I do like multiple director projects simultaneously. This one's directed by Billy Wilder, who did Sunset Boulevard and The Lost Weekend, which you collabed with me on that video.
Yep.
And we did, and Double Indemnity and several others. This one is weird because it's got Audrey Hepburn, one of my big crushes of any actresses, past or present.
Yep.
She's in that. It's a rom-com where she's starting to fall in love and, be herself in Paris. But it's weird who they got as her love interest in the movie. They got Gary Cooper, of all people.
That what's so weird about that?
Well, there was that whole thing. I think there was a stuff in Audrey Hepburn movies. There was this common thing where she would go out or she would fall in love with older men. That tended to be a trope in like Hollywood movies back then, which is weird because I've never complained about that in some of her other movies. Like she goes out with Audrey Hepburn and Sabrina. No, not Audrey. No, she not goes out with herself. She goes out with Humphrey Bogart, and Sabrina, and he's older in that movie. And I'm like, I buy the chemistry in that movie. And she goes out with Cary Grant in Charade. And again, Cary Grant's like twice her age, but they work great together in that movie, this cat and mouse suspense thriller. But
Mm-hmm.
here, every time I was watching this movie, I see Gary Cooper, and I just see, his age. He's like 56 when they did this movie. I looked it up. And I literally am like, this guy looks like Audrey Hepburn's dad. And it just made the movie look unintentionally creepy.
Kind of like one of
What
those.
Billy Wilder was going for. So it kind of left a little bit of a disconnect compared to some of the other Billy Wilder films that I've watched, and Audrey Hepburn movies as well, because I don't know why they love pairing Audrey Hepburn up with older men. I guess it just depends on the chemistry between the actors to make it work, but it just does not work in this movie.
There's this comedian, his name is Bill Engvall. He made this joke about his friend who his friend was in his 50s, and he started dating a woman in her 20s, and 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 the joke was that he was telling about it's those relationships who people look at and they're like, money or drugs, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I know Bill Engvall best for the "Here's Your Sign" stuff.
Here's your sign. And he's retiring this year, God bless him.
Oh wow. And then one final movie. I apologize if I've fogged up too much of the podcast because I watched quite a bit of movies.
No. This is a lot of fun. I'm having a blast doing this. So
good to hear. Good to hear. Last I watched Bound. I actually watched this last night at the time of this video. It was the directing debut of the Wachowskis, who later did The Matrix and Speed Racer and movies like that. Bound is an interesting movie. It's a heist movie. It involves gangsters, but there is an interesting little twist in the movie, and it involves around these two women. One is like the love interest of the mobster character. The other is like an ex-convict who works as like a janitor in this apartment. And these two girls have a secret relationship with one another. And it gets to the point where they want to live a life for themselves. And so they plot to steal money from the girlfriend's gangster boyfriend. And they plot a big heist pretty much. And I thought this was an interesting movie. The two women, I forget the name of the convict, went off the top of my head. It's like Gina something. I'm not too familiar with her. I can check real quick. But the main one is played by Jennifer Tilly, who was best known for being in like The Bride of Chucky. And I know her from some voice work at Disney. Gina Gershon, according to Letterboxd.
I was going to say, and Joe Pantoliano is in there, which
he's the mobster, and he's very over the top and paranoid and pretty delusional in his performance, and he plays it very well. And apparently he got along with the Wachowskis well, because he would be cast as Cypher in The Matrix, and he was really good in that movie as well.
Yeah.
All around, it's a movie that it's definitely an acquired taste. It definitely, I think it got more conventional as it went along, and I thought the third act was kind of It kind of became a standard third act, and I kind of got bored by the end of it. But as a whole, it was an interesting film. I liked the unique spin on the heist genre. I liked the cast. And for their first movie, the Wachowskis did a good job with a smaller scale movie. And it definitely made a name because, they made The Matrix after this. This was like their audition for The Matrix. There's a couple of shootout sequences that have these slow-mo effects in it. I'm like, yep, I see The Matrix in some of these sequences. So that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah. No matter how many times I see The Matrix, whenever the Cypher part comes up when he's eating the steak and he's like, I know that the steak is not real, but in The Matrix, I know that it is juicy, and it is delicious. Ignorance is bliss. It's like Cypher is like, he's one of my favorite villains because of how much I hate him, because we all know what happens there. It just, Joe Pantoliano understood his assignment, like in that role. That's all I'll say.
Yep. And he's pretty good in Bound as well. If you haven't seen it, like I said, it's definitely an acquired taste. But if you want to see an interesting heist movie, it's definitely worth checking out. It was on a free streaming service that I have called, I think it's called Pluto. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it was on there, but with ads. But it was an interesting movie.
Yeah, Pluto and also Tubi are really interesting because I remember Rachel and I for the Hidden Gems podcast, we did a Tubi episode and she was kind of like, yeah, let's not do that again. But then all of a sudden I started poking my head in there. They've got some seriously good stuff in there, all for free too, if you don't mind the ads, which I actually mute them on my TV when I'm watching them. But they've slowly kind of started to be like, we've actually got some good stuff here.
Yeah, you have to work around, gotta look through some weird titles, but you'll find some good hidden gems in there. Sometimes you'll see some like mainstream movies in there occasionally. It's an interesting little streaming service for sure. All right, I think I've rambled long enough about the movies I've watched. So what did you watch this past week?
Well, not as much as you, but I did watch a couple of things. First of all, I watched Children of Men from Alfonso Cuarón. I
Great
think
movie.
I think I had seen this before, but it was one of those things where it was like I was kind of hazy on. I'm glad I rewatched it because I actually have a review coming up on my channel for it, or actually by the time this episode drops, it will be up. So I was rewatching that, and it's so good. It really is. Alfonso Cuarón just did a fantastic job because I ended up watching that, and then the next day I ended up watching the 355, which talk about a serious downgrade in quality, which I'm not trying to dog on the 355. I think it was just okay, but it's like you have Children of Men, Emmanuel Lubezki cinematography, Alfonso Cuarón direction, to go from that to the 355. It was a bit of a contrast. That's all I will say.
Yeah, it's been several years since I've last seen Children of Men, but I remembered it being really, really good. I remember there was this one like long take shot in this movie that lasts a good, I don't know, 8 to 10 minutes. It's like this intense chase sequence in the movie. And Karan did a great job of keeping you on the edge of your seat during all that tension throughout that sequence. I don't remember the full context because it's been several years. I think it's Clive Owen, and then they're like a pregnant woman in the back seat or something like that, and there's like a swarm of people after them or something.
Yeah, it was an attack on this country road because Clive Owen had been kind of brought into this. He was like, just take me home, guys, like seriously. But then they're like, you're in too deep. And it's like, okay, I guess I am. And then it is really intense stuff. And it makes me think that Clive Owen, he was I think he was one of those guys who was like trying to be lined up for more stuff, but then it just kind of never happened. Kind of like Sam Worthington or Taylor Kitsch. I remember in 2012, they put Taylor Kitsch in 3 movies. John Carter, which I like, but I get why people don't like it. Battleship, which I'm not a fan of, and Savages, alongside John Travolta as a DEA agent. I have not seen that last one, but it was like Taylor Kitsch was everywhere in 2012, and then he disappeared, and then he showed up, and I think it was called American something. It starred Michael Keaton and Dylan.
American Assassin.
That's the one. Yes, that's the one. So Taylor Kitsch was everywhere, then he was nowhere, and then here he was. So seeing Clive Owen, and I looked at his IMDb, he got steady work. I believe he was in American Crime Story about the Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton thing. He was Bill Clinton, which is just strange to me, but yeah. I don't know. It just feels like Clive Owen was set up for bigger things, and they just kind of never happened.
Yeah, every time I've seen Clive Owen in something, he's usually one of the best things about whatever movie that is. Like even his small scene in the Born Identity was definitely a pivotal moment for Jason Bourne is a character. The look at us, look at what they made you give.
That line is the theme for the whole trilogy. Look at us. Look at what they make you give. And I did a Bourne trilogy review late or mid last year. So, and I brought up how the trilogy is all connected by that one line. So Clive Owen is really good. So that Children of Men review will be live on my channel by the time this airs. And then on the side, I've been secretly rewatching, or not rewatching, but rewatching in certain cases, every movie that I can from the 1980s. I finished all of 1980, and now I'm in the middle of 81. And for some strange reason, it was like the late summer of 81, it was just mostly horror movies. The first one I watched was called Hell Night. This one also, coincidentally, stars Linda Blair, and as a college student, and she is a part of the sorority. And on Halloween night, there's this tradition in this fraternity where the new initiates get locked in this very haunted house where a very grisly crime happened. And I'm pretty sure you can figure out what happens here. It's like, oh, it's spooky. And they're like, just games, but it turns out to actually be spooky. I can assure you my description is far more interesting than what we actually got. I love the atmosphere here. I thought Linda Blair did a good job. The teenagers really didn't annoy me too much, which I see as a plus. But I don't know, the movie was just kind of drab. It was just kind of drab for me. I thought there was very long scenes of these two specifically just trying to make out. And like, guys, can you just figure out something with this? Like do something with this. And they just go back to it, and they keep getting interrupted. And it's like, oh, come on, really? I was more interested with how they weren't doing their business rather than getting invested into the story, which even I know is just, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, 80s slasher movies are like a hit and a miss for me. There's the good ones, the iconic ones, like the Nightmare on Elm Street. And then there's just those weird slashers where it's just no substance. All the characters are annoying. There's an excessive amount of sex scenes for no reason except to get teenagers into the seats. And then a lot of crazy kills. And usually the kills are probably the only decent thing about most of them, but most of these movies are just trash.
Yeah.
Actually, for I think around Christmas, I've watched Silent Night, Deadly Night. I don't know if you've heard of that one. That's a very infamous slasher movie where a guy dresses up in a Santa Claus suit and starts slaughtering people because of trauma that he had as a kid, because he witnessed his parents get murdered by a guy in a Santa Claus suit. And that movie just rubbed me off the wrong way, not because of the premise, but because of the whole idea of the guy grown up years later doing the same thing of the trauma. And like the kills make absolutely no sense. Like there's this one scene where the guy at his job, while he's in the Santa Claus suit, witnesses a girl that he likes get sexually assaulted by one of her co-workers. And so he's upset by all this. And so he kills the guy off with an axe. And was it an axe? It was either an axe or a pistol. I don't remember now because it's that bad of a movie. So after he kills her off, you think he's going to let her go free, right? Nope. She screams at the situation, and he just kills the girl for some reason after saving her life. So some of the kills I just thought were too mean for a movie like this. You should have just done like, I don't know, a typical slasher movie where at least the kills made sense. This one, I'm like, why did you kill a woman that you just saved? It made no sense.
Yeah, I've only heard of the sequel, Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. That's only because Chris Stuckman did a Hilariosity review of it. And I was just, the entire time I was just sitting there like, how did this get made? How did Shout Factory make a restored Blu-ray of this? Why would they do this?
I did see the sequel as well. The sequel is technically worse, but it's more entertaining than the first film. Although you have to get through the first 45 minutes, which is literally just the brother of the main character in the first movie talking to a psychiatrist, recapping the entire first movie. So we see an entire recap of the first movie for half the movie, which, considering I don't like the first movie, that tried my patience. The movie actually becomes more entertaining to watch when it tells its own story, where the brother goes crazy psycho and does a lot of things. There's this one scene, Garbage Day. I was getting that scene alone is worth watching. That guy's acting, his maniacal laugh, and the way he twitches his eyebrows. It's almost Nicolas Cage level crazy, almost.
No, I wouldn't go quite that far because Nicolas Cage is in a whole nother stratosphere when it comes to that.
He comes close.
Okay, fair enough. And then, keeping with the early 80s theme, I watched another horror movie called Deadly Blessing. This was directed by a very young Wes Craven. This was before Nightmare. This was after Last House on the Left. So it was in this weird nougaty middle of, like, just before he becomes, like, the biggest name in horror, and before he just, and, like, after he had just gotten his start. And surprisingly, I liked this one. This starred Sharon Stone, Ernest Borgnine, and it tells a story of this farm which sits next to this religious cult, which is described in the movie as a cult that makes the Amish look like swingers. and so and so one of their own ends up marrying a girl in college, leaving the cult and moving next to it, but he ends up dying mysteriously. And Ernest Borgnine, the leader of the cult, is like, the incubus is upon you. And it's better than what I just did. But I was expecting to not like this, but there was actually some quite effective moments. There's a moment where the wife is taking a bath, no nudity, but there's a scene where she's taking a bath, and someone sneaks a snake into the bathtub. And maybe it's just my fear of snakes, but just the whole tension of this snake in this water, and just like, get out of the tub, like get out of the tub. And she finally sees it, gets out of the tub, grabs a poker, runs back in, and just stabs the thing. And it's like, it's off screen, you don't see it, but it's just intense stuff. And the ending, let's just say, having now seen movies like Midsommar and Hereditary, I kind of have a feeling that Ari Aster may have watched this movie. I'm not calling it like a ripoff or something, but I think when it comes to religious cult movies, they kind of tend to borrow certain things. That's all I'm going to say. The ending is nuts. That's all I will say. So I would be safe to say that Deadly Blessing is a bit of a hidden gem, especially from Wes Craven.
You got me intrigued on this one. Although, to be fair, I have no idea how to picture Ernest Borgnine in a horror movie. I usually see him as the nice guy in a lot of movies I've seen him in. Here he's the one running the cult.
Yeah, he seems, you're kind of thinking, oh, I think he's kind of shifty. He may be the bad guy, but it's like, no, he's just super into his faith. Like he's like the type who will beat children with a rod if they misbehave. If he sees like a family member doing something against the code, he will shun them. Like one of his younger sons basically dates a girl outside of the cult, and he learns about this and is like, the devil has had you, our heart and our ears have grown stone to your cries, devil, or something like that. So he's very intense. That's all I will say.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of that Netflix movie, The Devil All the Time, where Robert Pattinson plays like one of them over the top crazy friends, like delusions.
It's kind of similar to that, yes. So I would recommend Deadly Blessings. I ended up watching it on Tubi, so I if you all are so inclined, I do recommend that. And then next up on my docket, I'm going to be watching Body Heat, which starred William Hurt and was directed by Lawrence Kasdan, who's primarily known as writing the screenplay for movies you may have heard of called Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Empire Strikes Back, those small little indie features. So that's going to be interesting to watch. And then next up, I think is a movie called The French Lieutenant's Daughter, which I've never heard of. So it's gonna be interesting to see. I'm going into a lot of these movies blind, and it's either gonna be like, it's gonna be forgettable, but I've surprisingly found some gems out of it.
Yeah, I bet. The one with Lawrence Kasdan sounds kind of interesting, though. I've seen one of his other directing efforts. Have you seen Silverado, the Western he
Oh,
did?
Silverado's great. I love that.
So good. That
Yeah,
was a hidden gem right there. I love Jeff Goldblum in that movie.
he's a poker player and an evil one at that.
Yes.
Yeah, and so anyway, that's all that I've been watching. Outside of that, I actually on the side I like to watch some old cartoons, and I've been working my way through old like Toonami lineups, and I'm currently midway through 1997, and the lineup was the 1985 Thundercats, Cartoon Roulette, which was an old Hanna-Barbera cartoon. I'm currently on this one called Young Samson. It's a lot of fun. Uh, Voltron, which I'm surprisingly not really getting into. I didn't think I thought I would like it, but I'm just not really getting attached to it. And then another Cartoon Roulette, and then The Adventures of Johnny Quest, which was the sequel to the original Johnny Quest TV show. Very bad CGI, especially in Quest World, but the rest of the time, it's actually not that bad. So that's fun to take a look back at.
I don't think I've seen the sequel show, but I've seen the original Johnny Quest back when
So good
we
is
had cable TV and we had the Boomerang channel back when they were playing like all the old Hanna-Barbera cartoons. I would watch Johnny Quest a lot as a kid. That show is awesome. It baffles me we have not gotten a Johnny Quest movie. Like, that
it.
would seem ripe, especially for either an animated film or a live action film. It seems like I don't know why they haven't come up with that yet.
It
They're
really
just too busy
does.
obsessed with doing WWE crossovers or whatever that new Scoob movie was.
And I'm a wrestling fan, and even I can admit those were very stupid. But yeah, I knew I picked you as the right guy for this co-host because I used to watch Boomerang all the time up until they made it like they're like a streaming service and they changed all the logos, and my heart broke that day. That's all I will say.
Yeah, Boomerang definitely hasn't been the same since it was when we were kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I memorized all the commercial blocks. I recognize all the transitions and the bumpers, like Boomer Action. It's just we should do a Boomerang episode sometime. Just gush about our memories of that. That'll be for the
Oh yeah, we would. It would take all night, all day.
future.
I'm here for it. And have you been keeping up on the Book of Boba Fett? I almost forgot to mention that.
Yes, I have. I watched episode 2, episode 3. We're actually recording this on a Tuesday night, so episode 3 is going to be dropping tomorrow morning. And I actually really liked episode 2. I said that episode 1 was kind of there, but it needed something else. Episode 2 provided that something else. So this has been a lot of fun so far.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the series as well. I really like the first episode just because I like seeing Boba Fett come out of the Sarlacc pit. That was an amazing fan service moment right there. But I feel like episode 2 dialed it up even further with more reveals, more flashbacks of what we saw in episode 1. That train heist was incredible. That's one of my favorite action scenes in a recent Star Wars project I've seen. I'm excited to see where the series is going to go, how it continues to dive more into Boba Fett as a character, and continue to prove why Boba Fett is a force to be reckoned with. I was a skeptic for the longest time, and now I'm a fan, thanks to this and Mandalorian Season 2.
Yeah, this is a limited series, so it's going to be interesting to see where the rest of the show goes. But I guess for a cheap plug, if you would like to see me review it, I'm doing it over on the Suit Up Geek Fix podcast and their channel. Those reviews are going to be 8 o'clock on every Wednesdays, as long as the show goes on. So be sure to check me out on that. But anyway, let's move on to the main event of the evening. Let's talk about Turning Red. Now, it was recently announced that Turning Red was originally supposed to be released in theaters on March 11th. However, that's no longer happening. It is releasing exclusively to Disney Plus, and this went over about as well as a fart in church. Nobody is liking this decision. It was recently reported that Pixar was disheartened at this decision. A lot of the animators and the director were very saddened by this news, and honestly, I'm right there with them. I think this is a very dumb decision. I don't know if Omicron has anything to do with it, but as someone who has read the science and knows that Omicron is still prevalent in our lives, we shouldn't discount it, but is far less severe than we are probably thinking it is. And I think people are starting to slowly be like, okay, as long as we're careful, I think we're going to be fine. It just makes no sense why it's going just straight to streaming. I mean, when Rachel and I were discussing it for Hidden Gems, which is going to be dropping on Friday when we're recording this, we were talking about how Disney Plus is kind of a dearth of content like for this first quarter outside of Book of Boba Fett. So maybe that has something to do with it, but I don't know. It just seems so heartless. Jacob, what do you think?
Yeah, I was very, very saddened when I heard this news. I feel really bad for Pixar in general because this is the third time in a row where a Pixar movie got shifted from theaters to streaming, first with Soul and then Luca and now Turning Red. Soul, I can see why they made the change because back in December 2020, I think most theaters were still closed at that point,
Yeah,
and I guess they feared Soul was going to lose a lot of money at the box office, so they moved it to Disney Plus to kind of cut their losses a little bit. Luca, I was definitely more questioning why because theaters were reopened by then. People were wanting to see movies on the big screen again, but they dropped it on Disney Plus for no reason, and I didn't get it then, and I still don't get it now. I'm especially more perplexed why they did it with Turning Red. I don't know all the details behind it, of course. Is it due to COVID and the Omicron? Still cannot take that name seriously. It sounds like a Transformers knockoff name. But
Omicron.
uh, maybe it's related to that. I don't know. I think people are a little too fearful of what's going on, I'll admit. And I feel like Hollywood has been doing that since the pandemic first started, but that's a different discussion for another day. But, or it could be, like you said, the lack of content on Disney Plus in the first quarter, and it was Disney's cheap excuse to just put something over there. I don't know, but I do know that a lot of people aren't happy by this decision. I have read reports, even when they moved Luca, that some Pixar employees apparently are demoralized by this move because they're making these big budget animated movies that are supposed to go out in theaters and they're just being dumped on Disney Plus. And none of the Pixar movies are, even Luca had that $30 premiere access fee that all the other Disney movies that did the drop had. So I feel like a lot of Pixar people feel cheapened by some of these recent moves that Disney's been making. It's definitely, I feel like, a sad experience in recent months over at Pixar. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I hope something turns around for them. Hopefully Lightyear will stay a theatrical release this summer. I really hope that one stays.
Yeah, it's I really feel sad because I have a lot of sympathy for filmmakers because making movies is incredibly difficult. Even making like great ones, I imagine, like whether it's like a great movie or like a lower tier like B movie, it's still really hard to like you make it and then you shuffle it around and hopefully it gets seen by somebody and then it gets pushed somewhere by some studio and hopefully it is seen by the masses. So I always try and take a step back and try and be like, okay, these people poured their heart and soul into this more than likely. So I should try and give it a chance, and especially with Turning Red and hearing the rumors about how everyone at Pixar is just kind of like, again, like it's kind of like a why do we even bother kind of thing. Because, like you said, Soul totally understandable. Luca kind of questionable, but again, I do understand to a certain extent. Like Turning Red, it just almost kind of makes no sense. I'm afraid that Pixar is just going to become like the direct to Disney Plus arm of the Disney Empire, which God, I just hope that does not happen because just for my love of Pixar alone, I just hope that doesn't happen. I may be wearing a tinfoil hat, but just the questions are there. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I certainly hope that's not the case because that wouldn't even make sense. Why would you want to make Pixar like your direct to streaming method, or back then it would have been direct to video? That would not make sense because of the hard work that Pixar puts into all their animated films. Like they revolutionized computer animation, for crying out loud, with Toy Story. Like they deserve more respect than this.
Yeah, let's not forget that Pixar pretty much carried Disney for quite some time. Like in the early, like throughout the noughties, like regular streamlined Disney, while I love movies like Treasure Planet, it's one of my favorite Disney movies personally, they were kind of lacking. They were making movies like Home on the Range and just all the to video stuff like we've been talking about. And Pixar was just doing like Toy Story 2, Monsters Inc., like uh like Incredibles and just riffing off nothing but hits. It was like it wasn't even funny. It was like Pixar was way up here and regular streamlined Disney was like way down here. It wasn't until like say Tangled that they really started to get started. Then Frozen and they started to recapture some of their magic. Pixar, the Cars movies are not a favorite of mine, but I do but but it's still it's complicated, but it was like Pixar was like they were number one, and now I just feel like they're getting shafted now 3 times. It just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me either. It's I don't get it.
Well, anyway, I throw it to all of you. What are your thoughts on the whole Turning Red situation? Are you as red as we are over this? Leave it in the comments. We'd love to hear what you have to say about that. But that's it. That's episode 3. That we did it. So thank you all so much as always for watching. And Jacob, thank you so much as always. Where can people find you?
Well, people can find me on YouTube, of course, where I have my 2 channels, my main channel and my second channel, Storytime with Jacob. You can also follow me on Letterboxd, Twitter, and Facebook. I got a lot of exciting content coming your way. I'll be doing reviews of movies like the movies that I brought up in the podcast, like Love in the Afternoon, Cinderella 2, Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and all the others that I mentioned. On my second channel, I've been going through, let me plug this book, by the way. It's a great read, Lucky Man by Michael J. Fox. This is a book that he published in 2002, and it chronicles like his life and career at that point, and also his struggle with Parkinson's disease and how it made him ultimately a better man by the end of it, and how he was happier after he got the disease than before. I've read most of the book by now. I'm down to the last 2 chapters, and considering I don't think I've ever read an autobiography before until now, this is a fantastic read. If you love Michael J. Fox or have a deep respect for this actor, this is a great read.
Yeah, definitely check out Jacob on both of his channels. They will be linked in the description of this video. As for me, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at RyanCam20. If you liked what you'd seen here, please do hit the subscribe button. I would truly appreciate that. This podcast is going to be dropping every Wednesday. I have so much fun doing this with Jacob. It's been a great time. I'm going to be having reviews up for Children of Men very soon, as well as the 2011 film The Adjustment Bureau, starring Matt Damon and Emily Blunt, a movie that I absolutely love and adore. I'm also going to be having reviews for new releases such as Scream 2022 and Belle, as well as Redeeming Love and a couple of others when they come out. And then elsewhere, I'm a part of the Boba Fett review show on the Suit Up Geeks podcast, like I mentioned. And then I'm also going to be participating in an Oscar fantasy draft over there. That's going to be a lot of fun. I think I'm not going to do so well at that, but I'm going to be around a lot of great people, so that'll be just a lot of fun. So anyway, for Jacob, my name is Ryan Cam. Thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.